CEO abandoned his housewife for his ex-wife. He didn't expect she was a secret billionaire. He regretted it too late. Hello, my very beautiful family. Welcome home to your channel, Mr. Peter Stories. This is not just a channel, it's our safe space, our circle of love and our voice. But today my heart is heavy. Fake channels are stealing my voice, my stories, and my soul's work. They pretend to be Mr. Peter while I stay up praying, writing, and giving you my all. It hurts deeply, but I won't stop because I know you're with me, and I love you for that. Before we begin, let me pour a prayer into your life. Dear Heavenly Father, I lift up my beautiful family into your loving arms. Surround them with peace that passes all understanding. Break every chain holding them back. Heal every wound they hide behind their smiles. Open doors no one can shut. Send angels to protect them, guide them, and walk beside them. Bless their homes with laughter, their hearts with strength, and their days with miracles. Let love find them, peace stay with them, and joy never leave them. In your mighty name, amen. My family, please help me fight back with love. Subscribe, like, comment. I stand with my brother, Mr. Peter, and share this on WhatsApp and every platform you can. If you see a fake channel using my voice, unsubscribe and report it. Now, let's begin. Not in pain, but in pure love. Always. The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow across the king-sized bed where Ronnie Burnett lay, watching her husband dress for work. Michael Dawson stood before the mirror, his strong fingers deftly knotting, his silk tie, brows furrowed in concentration. She loved these quiet moments when she could admire him without him noticing. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the serious set of his shoulders that carried the weight of his growing company. "You're staring again," Michael said, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror, a smile softening his features. Ronnie stretched lazily, the satin sheets cool against her skin. "Can you blame me? 5 years of marriage, and you still take my breath away, Mr. Dawson." He turned, crossing the room in 3 long strides before leaning down to capture her lips in a kiss that made her heart flutter. His cologne, sandalwood and citrus, enveloped her so distinctly him that she knew she'd recognize it blindfolded in a crowded room. "I'm going to be late tonight," he murmured against her lips. "Board meeting." Something in his tone made her pull back slightly, searching his eyes. "Everything okay?" "Just business." The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." There it was again. That subtle dismissal of her understanding, as if the world of commerce and ambition existed in a realm beyond her comprehension. If only he knew. But that was a secret she had kept buried for reasons that once seemed important, but were beginning to feel increasingly hollow. "I made reservations at Bellini's for Friday," she said, changing the subject. "Our anniversary." Michael straightened, checking his watch. "This Friday? Already?" The slight frown that creased his forehead spoke volumes. He'd forgotten. Again. "I can reschedule if it's a problem," she offered, swallowing her disappointment. No, he said quickly, reaching for his suit jacket. "Friday is perfect. I'll clear my calendar." But his eyes had already drifted to his phone, thumb scrolling through emails even as he spoke. When had this distance between them begun? So, subtle at first, like water gradually eroding stone, not in dramatic waves, but in persistent, barely perceptible drips that over time carved a canyon where once there was solid ground. "Michael," she said softly, rising from the bed wrapped in the sheet. "Look at me." He did, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the man who had once pursued her with relentless devotion, the man who had proposed on a windswept beach at sunset, voice breaking as he promised to love her eternally. She reached up, straightening his tie, though it needed no adjustment. It was an excuse to touch him, to bridge the widening gap between them. "I love you. Don't forget that in between all those meetings and conference calls." His expression softened, and he cupped her face with a tenderness that made her throat tighten. "How did I get so lucky?" he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. For a heartbeat, they were them again. Michael and Ronnie, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds. "Not CEO Michael Dawson and his housewife. Go," she said, playfully pushing him toward the door. "Conquer the world. I'll be here when you get back." After he left, Ronnie moved through their penthouse apartment with practiced ease, the morning ritual a dance she had perfected. To anyone looking in, she was the quintessential devoted wife, managing their home with grace, planning dinner parties that advanced Michael's social connections, creating the perfect sanctuary for him to return to each night. Little did he know that before he rose each morning, she had already reviewed market reports from 3 continents, made investment decisions worth millions, and conducted video conferences with her executive team, all from her private study that he believed was simply her hobby room where she painted and read. The deception had begun innocently enough. When they met, Michael had been wounded by his failed relationship with Beth Carter, a woman who had made him feel inadequate for his modest beginnings and startup ambitions. He'd spoken bitterly of how Beth had chosen a wealthier man, how she had mocked his dreams. So when Ronnie recognized Michael at a cafe, the brilliant founder of Dawson Tech whose reputation preceded him in business circles, she had made a spontaneous decision to keep her own wealth and position secret. She wanted to be loved for herself, not her fortune or influence. She wanted a man who would see her, not her empire, and Michael had. He had fallen for the woman who laughed at his jokes, challenged his mind, and listened to his dreams. He had fallen for Ronnie Burnett, the woman, not R.E. Burnett, the reclusive billionaire whose identity was known to only a select few in the business world. In their early days, hiding her business empire had seemed romantic, even empowering. She had relished the double life, loving how Michael admired her for the small things, her kindness, her passion, her way of seeing beauty in the everyday. The truth would come out eventually, she had thought, when the time was right. But the right time never seemed to arrive. As Michael's own company grew, so did his pride in being the provider, the protector. He took such satisfaction in giving her the life he thought she'd never had before him. How could she take that away? And so the lie of omission continued, year after year, until it became a wall between them that she alone could see. Ronnie sighed, letting her fingers trail over the breakfast dishes they had shared earlier. The apartment felt emptier these days after Michael left. His absences had grown longer, more frequent. The late nights at the office, the weekend meetings, the business trips that extended without explanation. She wasn't naive. Something was changing. Someone was changing him. Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder. In 20 minutes, she would need to be R.E. Burnett again, conducting the quarterly review of her international holdings. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of simple truth. She missed her husband, not the distracted man who had left this morning, but the passionate soul who had once written her love letters and planned surprise weekends away just to see her smile. She moved to her study and unlocked the hidden panel that concealed her workstation. Before she transformed back into the business titan she truly was, she allowed herself one more moment of vulnerability. Her fingers found the small velvet box in her desk drawer. Inside was the anniversary gift she had chosen for Michael, a watch engraved with words from their wedding vows. Would he even remember what they had promised each other? Did those vows still echo in his heart as they did in hers? The sound of the front door opening startled her. Michael never returned once. He left for the day. Her heart raced as she quickly secured her secret office and moved toward the entryway. "Forgot my presentation files," he explained, brushing past her to his home office. Ronnie leaned against the doorframe, watching him rifle through his desk. "I could have brought them to you." "No need," he said, not looking up as he searched. She studied him. The tense set of his shoulders, the way he avoided her gaze. This man who had once looked at her as if she were the center of his universe now seemed to be orbiting a different sun. "Found it," he announced, holding up a thumb drive. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and Ronnie didn't miss the way his expression changed, softened, brightened, before he quickly pocketed the device. "Michael," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Is there something you want to tell me?" He froze momentarily, then composed his features into careful neutrality. "What do you mean? You've been elsewhere lately, even when you're here." She kept her tone gentle, not accusatory. He approached her, placing his hands on her shoulders. His touch was warm, familiar, but somehow different, like a beloved song played in a minor key. "I've just been under a lot of pressure with the company," he said, his eyes meeting hers but not quite holding her gaze. "This merger is taking everything I've got, but it'll be worth it, Ronnie. I'm building something for us." For us. The words rang hollow against the growing certainty in her heart. "You know you can talk to me," she said quietly. "About anything, the company, the pressure, whatever's on your mind." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that once felt intimate, but now seemed designed to avoid her searching eyes. "I know, and I love you for it. We'll talk more on Friday, okay? Anniversary dinner. Just you and me." As he walked out the door again, Ronnie felt it with absolute clarity. The seismic shift beneath their marriage, the name her heart whispered, made her feel physically ill, but she couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Beth Carter, Michael's ex-wife, the woman who had broken his heart and helped shape his perception of what a supportive partner should be. Someone like Ronnie, who he believed needed his success and security. Not someone like Beth, who had demanded it and then left when it wasn't enough. But people changed, ambitions evolved, and Beth Carter had been making headlines lately with her return to the city after her own wealthy marriage had ended. Ronnie closed her eyes, steadying herself against the doorframe. She was not a woman who surrendered easily, not in business, and certainly not in love. If Michael was drifting toward his past, she would fight for their future. But to do that, she might finally have to reveal who she truly was, and risk losing the one thing money couldn't buy. A love that was real, not built on wealth or power, but on the truth of who they were together. Her phone chimed again, more insistently this time. The world of R.E. Burnett called. With one last look at the door Michael had disappeared through, Ronnie straightened her shoulders and turned toward her study. She had empires to run, and it seemed a marriage to save. The irony wasn't lost on her, that she could command boardrooms and move markets with a word, yet now faced the most important negotiation of her life, the one for her husband's heart. Beth Carter's laugh carried across the upscale restaurant, tinkling like expensive crystal. Beautiful, but with edges that could cut. Michael Dawson found himself leaning forward to catch every word, as if magnetized by a force he thought he'd forgotten. So there I was, stranded in Milan with nothing but a couture gown and stolen luggage, Beth said, her slender fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. The ambassador had to send his personal car. She looked different from his memories, more refined, somehow sharper around the edges. Her honey-blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and the black dress she wore clung to her body like it had been painted there. But her eyes, those caramel-colored eyes that had once torn his heart to shreds, remained the same. "You always did find trouble in the most glamorous places," Michael said, sipping his scotch. This meeting had been her idea, a harmless catch-up between old friends, she'd said in her message. Just coffee, he'd told himself when agreeing. Yet, somehow they were now sharing an intimate corner table at Le Cirque, with 2 empty wine bottles between them, and the restaurant nearly deserted. Speaking of glamorous, Beth leaned closer, her perfume, expensive and intoxicating, clouding his senses. "Look at you, Michael, CEO of Dawson Tech. I always knew you'd make it." "No, you didn't," he thought bitterly. "You told me I was chasing pipe dreams when you left." "It's been a journey," he said instead. Beth's fingers brushed against his on the table. The touch, seemingly accidental but lingering, just long enough to send a jolt through him. "I made a mistake, Michael," she whispered, her eyes never leaving his. "Walking away from us. It's the biggest regret of my life." The words hung between them, dangerous and seductive. He should leave, he knew. Go home to Ronnie, kind, supportive Ronnie, who had never demanded more than he could give, who had believed in him when his company was nothing but an idea and a mountain of debt. "It's late," he said, checking his watch. "Nearly midnight." He hadn't told Ronnie he'd be out this late. "I should go." Beth's smile faltered only for a second. "Of course. Your wife must be waiting." The way she said wife, like it was a quaint curiosity, made something defensive rise in him. "Ronnie understands my schedule." "How convenient," Beth murmured. "I remember when you used to race home to me, ignoring calls just to spend 5 more minutes together." The memory stung with its accuracy. When had he stopped racing home to Ronnie? When had late nights and missed dinners become acceptable, even expected? "Things change," he said, signaling for the check. "People change." Beth's laugh was soft as she reached across to straighten his tie, an intimate gesture that felt like trespassing on something sacred between him and Ronnie. "Not everything changes, Michael. Some things just hibernate." In the taxi home, Michael closed his eyes, willing away the confusion Beth's presence had stirred in him. It was just nostalgia, he told himself. The intoxication of revisiting your past and finding it suddenly palatable again. The penthouse was dark when he arrived home, save for a single lamp in the living room. Ronnie had fallen asleep on the couch, a book splayed open on her chest. Her face in repose was breathtaking, the gentle curve of her lips, the fan of dark lashes against her cheeks. She'd waited up for him, despite his text telling her not to. Guilt gnawed at him as he carefully lifted the book, a historical romance she'd been engrossed in all week. How different she was from Beth, where Beth was all sharp angles and calculated gestures. Ronnie was soft warmth and spontaneous joy. Ronnie, who baked cookies for the doorman's children and remembered the names of their waiters. Ronnie, who had never asked him for anything but his heart. He knelt beside the couch, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Hey, sleeping beauty," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, momentarily confused before focusing on him. Her smile was instant, lighting up her entire face. "You're home," she murmured, voice husky with sleep. "I'm sorry it's so late," he said, helping her sit up. "The meeting ran longer than expected." It wasn't a complete lie, was it? Just a different meeting than the one she assumed. "So, Kay," she yawned, stretching like a contented cat. "Did you eat? I can heat up the pasta I made." Even half asleep, her first thought was of his comfort. The contrast with Beth's self-absorbed stories made him feel even worse about his evening. "I ate at the office," he lied, unable to meet her eyes. "Let's get you to bed." She let him guide her to their bedroom, leaning sleepily against him. "You smell different," she murmured as they reached the doorway. Michael froze. Beth's perfume! He should have been more careful. "Probably Garson's cologne," he said quickly, naming his VP of marketing. "We were in that small conference room for hours." Ronnie made a non-committal sound as she changed into her nightgown, a silky blue thing that reminded him of how beautiful she was, how desirable. He watched her slide beneath the covers, her dark hair spreading across the pillow like spilled ink. "Come to bed," she said softly, patting the space beside her. "You look exhausted." He did join her, but sleep eluded him. As Ronnie's breathing deepened beside him, his mind returned to Beth and her parting words outside the restaurant. "I'm staying at the Archer through the month," she'd said, pressing a room key card into his palm. "Room 1520, in case you want to continue our conversation." The key card now burned in his jacket pocket across the room. He should throw it away. He would throw it away. Tomorrow. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text message. "Sweet dreams, Michael. It was good to remember what we had. What we could have again." He stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the delete button. Instead, he found himself saving her number before placing the phone face down and turning toward his sleeping wife. In the darkness, he reached for Ronnie, drawing her warm body against his, as if her presence could anchor him against the dangerous current of his past, pulling him out to sea. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Ronnie prepared breakfast the next morning, humming softly to herself. Despite Michael's late return, she felt strangely optimistic. He had held her tightly all night, something he hadn't done in weeks. "Something smells amazing," Michael said, entering the kitchen in his robe, hair still damp from his shower. "French. Toast with that maple syrup you love," she replied, sliding a plate in front of him as he sat at the counter. "Thought you could use a proper breakfast before another long day." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth spreading through her. "What did I do to deserve you?" The devotion in his eyes made her heart soar. Maybe she had been imagining the distance between them. Maybe it was just work stress after all. Must have been something terrible, she teased, cupping his face. "You're clearly being punished." His laugh was genuine as he pulled her onto his lap, her arms naturally finding their way around his neck. "If this is punishment, I'd hate to see what reward looks like." "Play your cards right, Mr. Dawson," she whispered against his ear, "and you might find out tonight." The heat in his eyes as he looked at her made her feel 23 again. Those early days when they couldn't keep their hands off each other, when every touch felt like fire and salvation all at once. His phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the moment. Michael tensed beneath her, his eyes darting to the device. "Expecting something important?" she asked lightly, though her instincts flared with warning. "Just work," he said, but she didn't miss how quickly he reached for the phone, angling it away from her view. The warmth between them cooled as he gently lifted her from his lap, his attention now fixed on whatever message he'd received. "I need to head in early today," he said, already moving toward the bedroom. "Anderson wants to review the quarterly projections before the executive meeting." Ronnie watched him go, the French toast forgotten. She'd been married to Michael long, enough to recognize evasion when she saw it. Something had changed. No, someone had entered their orbit, disrupting what had once been as predictable as the seasons. Her own phone chimed with a message from her assistant about an urgent situation with their European division. For a moment she hesitated. R.E. Burnett was needed, but Ronnie Dawson wanted to understand what was happening with her husband. She moved to the bedroom doorway, watching Michael dress with unusual care, selecting his best suit, the one that accentuated his broad shoulders and trim waist. "Michael," she said softly, "is there something you're not telling me?" He froze momentarily before continuing to button his shirt. "What do you mean?" "You seem different the past few days. Distracted. And last night—" "It's just work, Ronnie," he interrupted, his tone gentler than his words. "The company's at a critical juncture. I need to focus right now." She nodded, accepting his explanation, though her heart whispered doubts. "Don't forget about Friday, our anniversary dinner." "I wouldn't miss it," he promised, crossing to kiss her forehead, chaste, almost dismissive. As he headed for the door, his phone buzzed again. This time, she caught the flash of a smile before he schooled his features. "Love you," she called after him, deliberately. You too, he replied distractedly, already thumbing a response to whoever had captured his attention so completely. When the door closed behind him, Ronnie leaned against the wall, her composure finally cracking. She wasn't a woman given to jealousy or suspicion, but neither was she a fool. Something fundamental had shifted in their marriage, as sudden and devastating as an earthquake. She moved to the window, watching as Michael emerged from their building below. Instead of heading toward his waiting car, he walked to a sleek convertible parked across the street. The driver's door opened, and a blonde woman emerged, greeting Michael with a familiar embrace that lingered just seconds too long. Even from this distance, Ronnie recognized her immediately from the society pages and business profiles. Beth Carter, Michael's ex-wife. The woman who had broken his heart years ago when her ambition had outweighed her affection. Beth's recent divorce from the shipping magnate she'd left Michael for had made headlines in the financial world, as had her return to the city with her substantial divorce settlement. Ronnie's hand pressed against the cold glass as she watched Michael slide into Beth's passenger seat, laughing at something she said. The car pulled away, carrying her husband toward a past she thought they'd both left behind. The buzz of her phone pulled her from her trance. The European crisis wouldn't wait. With practiced compartmentalization, Ronnie Burnett, the secret billionaire, pushed aside Ronnie Dawson's breaking heart and moved toward her study. She had an empire to run, even as her marriage began to crumble beneath her feet. But as she unlocked her hidden office, a new resolve hardened within her. She had not built her business by surrendering to obstacles. She had not survived her hard-scrabble childhood by accepting defeat, and she would not lose the love of her life without a fight, even if that fight meant finally revealing the woman she truly was. Chapter 3. Temptation and Betrayal. You can't keep doing this, Michael. Ronnie's voice was soft but firm as she stood in their bedroom doorway, watching him pack an overnight bag. 3 late nights this week. Our anniversary dinner is tomorrow. Michael avoided her eyes, folding a dress shirt with meticulous care. It's just one night in Boston. The Cambridge. Investors won't reschedule. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. There were no investors in Boston, only Beth, who had suggested a business retreat at her friend's empty beach house on the Cape. Just to talk about old times, she'd said, her fingers tracing patterns. On his wrist across a restaurant table. I saw you with her, Ronnie said suddenly, her words dropping like stones in still water. Michael's hands froze on his suitcase. What? Beth Carter. I saw you getting into her car 3 days ago. Ronnie's composure was remarkable, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. Is that where you're going now? The moment stretched between them, taut with all the things unsaid. He could deny it, could manufacture an explanation about Beth consulting for the company, could tie himself deeper in lies. Instead, something cracked inside him. I don't know what I'm doing, Ronnie, he admitted, sitting heavily on the bed. She came back into my life, and it's like reopening a book at the chapter where everything went wrong, but this time with a chance to write a different ending. Ronnie's intake of breath was sharp, but she moved into the room, perching carefully on the edge of the bed, close but not touching him. Do you still love me? She asked, her question hanging in the air between them. Of course I do, he said, immediately, and he meant it. Ronnie was warmth and light and everything good in his life. She was his harbor in every storm. But you're drawn to her. It wasn't a question, so he didn't answer, didn't need to. Beth was the storm itself, thrilling, dangerous, unpredictable. She reminded him of who he'd been before, hungry, ambitious, reckless. I need to figure this out, he said finally. Ronnie's laugh was soft, tinged with disbelief. By spending the night with her? It's not like that, he protested, though even he heard the weakness in his words. Then what is it like, Michael? Help me understand. He looked at her then, really looked at the woman who had stood beside him for 5 years. Her dark eyes held no anger, only a profound sadness that twisted his heart. She was my past. He tried to explain. When she left, it nearly destroyed me. Now she says she made a mistake, that she never stopped loving me. And you believe her? Ronnie asked, her voice gentle despite everything. Did he? Beth had walked away when his company was struggling, choosing a wealthier man without a backward glance. But now she spoke of regret, of knowing her true heart too late, of second chances. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted. Ronnie reached out then, her fingers brushing his cheek in a touch so tender it made his throat tight. When I met you, you were shattered by her betrayal. I watched you put yourself back together, piece by piece. I loved every fragment of you, the broken parts and the healed ones. Her words transported him back to their beginning, Ronnie's patient kindness as he slowly learned to trust again, her unfailing belief in his dreams, even when he doubted himself. I remember, he whispered. She stood then, moving to the window that overlooked the city they'd made their home. Do you remember our first night together? How could he forget? They had talked until dawn in a 24-hour diner, reluctant to part even as the night faded into morning. He had never connected with another soul so completely. You said I made you feel like you'd come home after being lost for years, she continued, her back still to him. That's how you made me feel too. The memory squeezed his heart. He had meant those words with every fiber of his being. Ronnie. Go to Boston, she interrupted, finally turning to face him. Go to Beth, figure out what you need to figure out, but know this, I won't be your safety net while you decide if another woman is worth leaving me for. The quiet dignity in her stance, the absence of hysteria or threats, it was so quintessentially Ronnie that it made him ache with shame and admiration in equal measure. That's not what I'm doing, he protested weakly. Her smile was sad. Isn't it? You're packing an overnight bag to meet your ex-wife while telling your current wife it's a business trip. She shook her head. At least have the courage to be honest about what you're doing, Michael. He stood, crossing to her with the intention of taking her hands, explaining better, making her understand. But she stepped back, maintaining the distance. Between them, I should have told you the truth, he admitted. I'm sorry. Are you sorry you lied or sorry you got caught? She asked. The question struck him like a physical blow. When had he become this person? This man who snuck around behind his wife's back, who betrayed the trust of the woman who had healed him. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. They both knew who it was. You should go, Ronnie said quietly. She's waiting. Something in her tone made him hesitate, a shadow of the man he'd once been rising to the surface. I can cancel. We can talk about this. Really talk. Ronnie shook her head. No, Michael. I think you need to go. You need to see this through. So there are no what-ifs haunting you, haunting us, but understand what you're risking. She moved to her dresser, opening the small jewelry box where she kept her most treasured pieces. From it, she withdrew her wedding ring and placed it on the dresser with a finality that made his blood run cold. When you come back, we'll talk about whether there's still a marriage worth saving. The beach house was an architectural marvel, of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Inside, Beth waited in a dress that complemented her eyes and clung to every curve. Her smile when she opened the door was triumphant. You came, she said, pulling him inside. I knew you would. The interior was all sleek minimalism and carefully curated luxury. Like Beth herself, Michael thought. Beautiful, but somehow lacking the warmth that made a house a home. Wine, she offered, already pouring 2 glasses of something undoubtedly expensive and rare. Why did you come back, Beth? He asked, instead of accepting the glass. Why now? Her smile faltered slightly. Always so direct, It's one of the things I've missed about you." She set down the wine, moving closer. "I came back because I made a mistake, Michael. Leaving you was the worst decision of my life." "You seem pretty convinced it was the right one at the time," he said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "What was it you said? That I was going nowhere and you deserved better?" Her eyes flashed with something, annoyance perhaps, before she smoothed her expression. "I was young and shallow. Chester had money and connections I thought I wanted." She stepped closer, her perfume enveloping him. "But it was empty, Michael. All of it. No passion, no connection. Nothing like what we had." She reached up, her fingers tracing his jaw in a gesture that once would have made his heart race. "We were magic together, don't you remember?" The memories crashed through him with physical force. The passionate arguments that ended in equally passionate reconciliations, the reckless adventures, the feeling of constantly balancing on a knife edge of emotion. He did remember that intoxicating chemistry, but other memories surfaced too. The crushing sense of never being enough, the casual cruelty of her dismissals, the way she discarded him when something better came along. "I remember everything, Beth," he said, his voice low. "The good and the bad." Her eyes darkened with something like hunger. "The good was pretty spectacular, wasn't it?" She moved to the wall of windows, silhouetted against the churning ocean below. Lightning flashed on the horizon, illuminating her profile in stark relief, beautiful, dangerous, familiar. "Do you love her?" she asked abruptly. "Your perfect little housewife, does she make you feel alive the way I did?" The question hung between them, deceptively simple yet impossibly complex. Ronnie's love was nothing like Beth's. It was steady, where Beth was tempestuous, nurturing where Beth was demanding, honest where Beth was manipulative. "Yes," he said finally, "I love her." He hesitated, feeling the pull of the past, the seductive whisper of what might have been. "She loves me unconditionally, without games." "But?" Beth prompted, turning to face him with knowing eyes, taking his momentary hesitation as victory. Michael swallowed hard, the confession tearing from him. "But I can't deny there's still something between us, some connection I've never fully severed." Her smile was slow, triumphant. She crossed to him with deliberate steps, close enough that he could smell her perfume, feel the heat radiating from her skin. She took his hands in hers, her touch sending unwanted electricity through his veins. Then, "Stop fighting it, Michael. For tonight, just feel." She leaned in, her lips brushing his, tentative at first, then more insistent. For one suspended moment he surrendered, letting the familiar sensation wash over him, a dangerous nostalgia pulling him under like a riptide. Her arms wound around his neck, her body pressing against his with practiced precision. But as he closed, his eyes, it wasn't Beth he saw, it was Ronnie. Ronnie's face as she placed her wedding ring on the dresser. Ronnie's eyes, filled not with manipulation but with a love so profound it had allowed him this freedom to choose. Suddenly the spell shattered. This wasn't passion, it was poison disguised as passion. This wasn't love, it was addiction to a destructive pattern he'd spent years overcoming. He pulled away with such force that Beth stumbled slightly. "I can't do this." Beth's expression hardened. "Can't or won't?" "Both," he said, moving toward the door. "I'm sorry, Beth, coming here was a mistake." Her laugh was brittle. "You're running back to your little wife? The woman who has no idea who you really are or what you need." Michael paused, his hand on the doorknob. "You're wrong about her. Ronnie sees me more clearly than anyone ever has, including you." Beth's eyes narrowed. "What makes her so special? She's just a housewife, Michael. I'm offering you excitement, passion, a partner who understands your ambition." "She's everything," he said simply, the truth of it settling in his chest like a weight being lifted. "And I almost threw it away for—" "What?" A ghost from my past? He opened the door, letting in the cool evening air. Goodbye, Beth. Her voice stopped him at the threshold, suddenly cold and calculating. You'll regret this, Michael. She can't give you what I can. He glanced back at her, still beautiful, still desirable, but no longer the siren that had nearly lured him to destruction. That's where you're wrong. She gives me everything I need. I was just too blind to see it. The penthouse was dark. When Michael returned just after midnight, he set his bag down quietly, expecting to find Ronnie asleep. Instead, he found her on the balcony, wrapped in a throw blanket against the spring chill, staring out at the city lights. "You're back early," she said without turning. "I couldn't go through with it," he said, stepping onto the balcony. "I got all the way there and realized I was about to destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me." She turned then, her eyes searching his face. "And what is that exactly?" "Us," he said simply. "You, this life we've built." He moved closer, cautious, like approaching a wounded animal. "I let myself get caught up in the past, in what Beth and I were to each other. But it wasn't real, Ronnie. Not like what we have." Her expression remained guarded. "And what do we have, Michael?" "Everything," he whispered, reaching for her hand. To his relief, she didn't pull away. "Love, trust, a foundation that's unshakable, or it should be if I hadn't been such a fool." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I was so afraid. I'd lost you." "Never," he vowed, pulling her into his arms at last. "I'm so sorry, Ronnie. I nearly threw away everything that matters because I got caught up in a fantasy that never really existed." She clung to him, her body trembling slightly. "I thought you wouldn't come back." "I'll always come back to you," he promised, burying his face in her hair. "You're my home, Ronnie, my heart. Nothing and no one will ever change that." As they stood wrapped in each other's arms beneath the vast night sky, neither noticed the sleek car parked across the street, nor the blonde woman watching their reunion with calculating eyes. Beth Carter wasn't a woman who accepted defeat gracefully, and she had just begun to fight for what she believed should be hers. Chapter 4. Shattered Hearts. The anniversary dinner at Bellini's should have been perfect. Ronnie had spent hours getting ready, choosing a midnight blue dress that Michael once said made her look like a goddess. The 5-carat diamond earrings he'd given her last year caught the candlelight as she waited at their corner table, but the chair across from her remained empty. "Would you like to order, Mrs. Dawson?" the waiter asked for the third time, sympathy evident in his eyes. "Just a few more minutes," Ronnie said, checking her phone again. No messages, no calls. An hour turned into 2. The restaurant began to empty. Still, she waited, nursing a glass of wine that had long since warmed to room temperature. When her phone finally lit up, her heart leaped, then plummeted as she read Michael's message. "Emergency meeting running late. Don't wait up. Sorry." 5 years of marriage reduced to 6 cold words. Ronnie placed enough cash on the table to cover her untouched wine and a generous tip for the waiter who had been so kind. Her composure never wavered as she collected her wrap and purse. Only when she was alone in the taxi did she allow a single tear to fall. The penthouse felt cavernous in its emptiness. She moved through it like a ghost, her fingers trailing over photographs of happier times, their wedding day, holidays, quiet moments that had seemed insignificant then, but now felt precious beyond measure. She slipped off her heels and made her way to her secret office. Tonight, she wouldn't retreat into work as she usually did when troubled. Instead, she opened the small safe hidden behind a false panel and removed a velvet box containing the anniversary gift she'd planned to give Michael. A rare vintage watch he'd once admired, engraved with words from their wedding vows. Beside it in the safe sat a flash drive containing the truth of her identity, all her business holdings, financial statements, the empire she'd built. She had planned to finally tell him everything tonight, to remove the final barrier between them. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Urgent situation with the Singapore acquisition. Conference call in 10? Not tonight, Mira, she replied. Handle it without me. For once, the billionaire CEO R.E. Burnett was taking a back seat to Ronnie Dawson, the woman with a breaking heart. The sound of the front door opening startled her. She quickly secured her hidden office and moved to the living room, where Michael stood swaying slightly, his tie loosened, a faint smell of alcohol and unfamiliar perfume clinging to him. You're still up, he said, surprise evident in his voice. It's our anniversary, she said simply. Confusion crossed his face, followed by dawning horror. The dinner at Bellini's. Ronnie, I forgot, she finished for him. Clearly. There was an emergency. Don't, she interrupted, her voice soft but firm. Don't lie to me, Michael, not tonight. I deserve better than that. He had the decency to look ashamed. I'm sorry. Where were you? He hesitated, and in that pause she knew. With Beth. It wasn't a question. She needed to talk. She's going. Through a rough time and... Stop. Ronnie held up her hand. Just stop. She moved to the window, looking out at the city lights shimmering like fallen stars. I thought after that night when you came back from the beach house that we were starting over. You promised me. It's not what you think, he protested. We were just talking at the hotel bar. On our anniversary, she said, turning to face him. The anniversary you claim to have forgotten because of an emergency meeting. His silence was damning. I've been patient, Michael. I've given you space to work through whatever this is between you and Beth, but I won't be disrespected, not like this. For the first time, anger flashed in her eyes, a glimpse of the formidable businesswoman hiding beneath the patient wife. It was one mistake, he argued, one forgotten dinner. Is that all it is to you? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. One forgotten dinner. Or is it one more sign that your heart is somewhere else now? He moved toward her, reaching for her hands. Ronnie, please. I love you. I've always loved you. But you love her too, she said. It wasn't a question. His hesitation told her everything. Ronnie gently extracted her hands from his. I won't share you, Michael. I deserve better than half your heart. What are you saying? Fear edged into his voice. She crossed to the sideboard where she'd left her purse and withdrew an envelope. I'm leaving for a while. I need space to think. And so do you. Leaving? Panic flashed in his eyes. Ronnie, don't do this. We can work through this together. Can we? She asked quietly. Because it seems to me that you've already made your choice, even if you won't admit it. That's not true, he protested, desperation making his voice crack. I chose you. I came back from the beach house. Your body came back, she said sadly, but I'm not sure your heart did. She handed him the envelope. Inside are the keys to our lake house. I'll be staying there for a while. For how long? Until I know whether there's still a marriage worth fighting for. She picked up the small suitcase she'd packed earlier in the day, when some sixth sense told her this moment was coming. Don't go, he pleaded, grabbing her arm. Not like this. She looked at his hand until he released her. You need to decide what you want, Michael. Who you want. And so do I. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. The watch is on your nightstand. Happy anniversary. The lake house had been their weekend retreat, a rustic contrast to their sleek city penthouse. Ronnie found peace in its simplicity. The worn leather couch, the stone fireplace, the wraparound porch overlooking the water. Here, she could finally think clearly, without Michael's presence clouding her judgment. Here, she could be both Ronnie, Dawson and R.E. Burnett, without the constant compartmentalization that had become so exhausting. She set up her workstation in the sunroom, temporarily relocating the nerve center of her business operations. From this tranquil spot, she could run her company while deciding what to do about her heart. A week passed, with no word from Michael. Then 2. On the 17th day, as she sat on the dock with her morning coffee, watching the sunrise paint the lake in gold, she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, Michael's car. Her heart, traitor that it was, leaped at the sight of him emerging, looking haggard and uncertain as he approached. "You didn't answer my calls," he said by way of greeting. "I needed time," she replied, not moving from her spot on the dock. He sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I've missed you every second." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. "Have you figured out what you want?" "You," he said without hesitation. "It's always been you, Ronnie. I was confused, flattered by Beth's attention, caught up in resolving the past. But these weeks without you have been hell. I know what I want, who I want." "What about Beth?" His expression hardened. "It's over, completely over. I told her so the morning after our anniversary." And she accepted that. His hesitation was brief but noticeable. "She will. Eventually." Ronnie sipped her coffee, studying the man she'd married. He looked different somehow, humbled perhaps. The polished CEO facade had slipped, revealing the earnest man she'd fallen in love with. "I have something to tell." "You?" she said finally. "Something I should have told you years ago." Michael frowned, confusion replacing the hope in his eyes. "What is it?" "Let's go inside," she said, rising from the dock. "This requires privacy and probably a drink." In the living room, she poured them both a measure of bourbon before retrieving her laptop. "Do you know why I bought this lake house?" "Michael?" He looked surprised by the question. "You said you vacationed here as a child, that it held good memories." "That was true," she acknowledged, "but it wasn't the whole truth." She opened her laptop, typing in a complex password. "What I'm about to show you may change how you see me. If it does, I'll understand." The monitor displayed a homepage featuring the distinctive RE Enterprises logo, one of the most successful conglomerates in the country, known for its reclusive founder. "I don't understand," Michael said, frowning at the screen. "What does this have to do with—" "I'm R.E. Burnett," she said quietly. His laugh erupted, sharp and disbelieving, but died in his throat when he saw her unwavering expression. That's not possible. R.E. Burnett is a reclusive business legend, a 60-something man who is a carefully crafted fiction," she finished, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "The real R.E. Burnett is sitting right in front of you." She navigated through the secure server, methodically revealing her hidden life. Financial statements showing billions in assets, corporate structures spanning 5 continents, photographs of her at private board meetings, where she sat at the head of the table, commanding rooms full of powerful executives. Michael stood abruptly, pacing the room, as each new revelation hit him like a physical blow. His face cycled through emotions with dizzying speed: disbelief, shock, confusion, betrayal. He ran his hands through his hair, stopped to stare at the screen, then at Ronnie, as if seeing a stranger wearing his wife's face. 5 years, he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. 5 years of marriage, and I never knew I was sleeping next to one of the most powerful people in the world. He laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. God, I've been bragging to you about my company's quarterly profits while you've been... What? Moving global markets from our spare bedroom? His eyes, when they met hers, contained a pain that cut, deeper than anger would have. Who are you, Ronnie? Because the woman I married apparently doesn't exist. I'm the same person I've always been, she said urgently, reaching for him as he backed away. I've never lied about who I am, Michael, or how I feel about you, just about what I do. What you do. He echoed incredulously, his voice rising. This isn't like hiding a gambling habit or a secret smoking addiction, Ronnie. You're one of the wealthiest people in the country. Hell, probably the world. You've been pretending to be, he gestured wildly, searching for words. What, a housewife, playing dress-up at being normal while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to provide the lifestyle I thought you deserved? The word stung, though. She'd used it herself often enough. I never pretended anything. I simply didn't tell you about this part of my life. For 5 years. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. Why? Why would you keep something like this from me? The hurt in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. She had prepared for anger, indignation, even awe. She hadn't prepared for him to look wounded. When we met, she began carefully, you were still raw from Beth. You talked about how she'd left you for someone wealthier, more established, how she'd made you feel inadequate. Understanding dawned in his eyes. So you thought I couldn't handle knowing my wife was richer than me, that I was that insecure? No, she protested. I wanted you to love me for me, not my money or position. And then as time passed, it became harder to find the right moment to tell you. His laugh was bitter. While you were judging me for keeping secrets about Beth, you were hiding something far bigger. She flinched at the comparison. That's not the same, isn't it? He challenged. We've both been hiding pieces of ourselves, Ronnie. The difference is I admitted it when confronted. How long would you have kept this from me if I hadn't chosen you over Beth? The question hung between them, uncomfortable in its accuracy. Would she ever have found the courage to tell him if their marriage hadn't been threatened? I was going to tell you on our anniversary, she said softly. I had it all planned. Michael sank back onto the couch, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration she knew so well. So, all this time, when I was working late, stressing about providing for us, building something I thought would impress you, you were what? Humoring me? No, she exclaimed, reaching for his hand. Never that. I've always been proud of you, Michael, of what you've built, of your vision and drive. That was never pretense. He didn't pull away, but his hand remained limp in hers. I don't know what to believe anymore. Who are you, really? The question broke something inside her. I'm still me, she whispered. Still the woman who loves rainy Sundays and true crime. Podcasts, who burns toast and sings off-key in the shower, who loves you more than anything in this world. For a long moment, he was silent, staring at their joined hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a complex mix of hurt, confusion, and something else, perhaps the beginnings of understanding. I need time, he said finally, to process all this. It was her own words echoed back to her, and the irony wasn't lost on either of them. I understand, she said, slowly withdrawing her hand. He stood, moving toward the door before pausing. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. These weeks without you have been hell. I do choose you, Ronnie. I just need to figure out who exactly I'm choosing. After he left, Ronnie stood at the window watching his car disappear down the winding road. The truth was finally out, her last secret revealed. But instead of the liberation she'd expected, she felt only a profound sense of loss. In trying to protect their love, had she instead ensured its destruction? Chapter 5. The new reality rain lashed against the penthouse windows as Michael stared at the Wall Street Journal profile that had upended his world. R.E. Burnett steps into the light, reclusive billionaire finally revealed. Beneath the headline was a photograph of Ronnie, his Ronnie, looking polished and commanding in a tailored suit, addressing a room of executives. The caption identified her as Veronica E. Burnett, founder and CEO of RE Enterprises. The article detailed her rise from humble beginnings to self-made billionaire, her innovative approach to business, and her decision to finally reveal her identity after years of operating in the shadows. The writer speculated about personal, Reasons for her sudden transparency, mentioning unconfirmed reports of marital difficulties with husband Michael Dawson, CEO of Dawson Tech. Michael threw the paper aside, anger and confusion warring within him. 3 days had passed since the Lake House confrontation, and the revelation still felt like a waking dream. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd believed needed his protection and provision, was one of the most powerful business figures in the country. His phone buzzed with Beth's name flashing on the screen. He'd been avoiding her calls since returning from the lake house, but perhaps she was exactly what he needed, someone who understood ambition and how it could shape a relationship. "I saw the news," Beth said without preamble when he answered. "Your wife's quite the dark horse. I don't want to talk about Ronnie," he said sharply. "Fine," she conceded. "Talk to me about you then. How are you handling this bombshell?" He sighed, sinking onto the couch. "I don't know what I'm feeling, Beth. Betrayed, foolish, like the last 5 years have been some kind of elaborate joke at my expense." "I understand," she said, her voice softening. "It's humiliating to discover you've been kept in the dark, that the person you trusted most didn't trust you." Her words echoed his darkest thoughts. "Exactly. You deserve better, Michael," she continued. "Someone who's always been honest about who they are, no secrets, no lies." The irony of Beth, who had lied so easily during their relationship, positioning herself as the honest alternative, wasn't lost on him, but he was too emotionally exhausted to challenge it. "I keep asking myself if I ever really knew her," he admitted. "Did she ever really know you?" Beth countered. "The real you, the man with dreams and ambitions who isn't satisfied being arm candy to a billionaire." Her words struck a nerve. Was that all he would be now? "Mr. Ronnie Burnett, the trophy husband, have dinner with me tonight," Beth suggested. "Just as friends. You shouldn't be alone right now." He should refuse. He knew it. But the alternative was another night in this empty penthouse with only his thoughts for company. 7 o'clock, he agreed. Just as friends. The restaurant Beth chose was intimate and exclusive, the kind of place where privacy was guaranteed and indiscretion was the specialty. She looked stunning in a crimson dress that complemented her golden hair, her smile warm and inviting as she greeted him. "You look terrible," she observed, not unkindly. "Not sleeping?" "Not much," he admitted, accepting the scotch she had already ordered for him. "I remember your insomnia phases," she said, reaching across to straighten his tie. "You used to pace for hours, working through problems in your head." The familiar gesture stirred memories of their past life together, how she had always known his habits, his quirks, his demons. There was comfort in being known, even if the knowledge was wielded by someone who had once used it against him. "Tell me what you're really thinking, Michael," she urged, her eyes fixed on his. No filters, no judgments. And so he did. He told her about the shock of Ronnie's revelation, the hurt of realizing their marriage had been built on a foundation of half-truths. He spoke of his confusion about what this meant for their future, if they even had one. Beth listened attentively, offering validation and understanding in equal measure. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to solve his problems. She simply let him talk until the words ran dry and his scotch ran empty. "She should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning," Beth said finally. "If she truly knew you, she would have understood that your pride could withstand it." "Maybe I gave her reason to doubt that," he acknowledged. "I was pretty broken when we met, insecure about my prospects after I devastated you," she finished, her expression contrite. "One of many mistakes I deeply regret." She leaned forward, capturing his hand in hers. "But Michael, don't you see? Your reaction now proves her lack of faith in you was unjustified. You're hurt by the deception, not by her success." He hadn't considered it from that angle. It was true. He wasn't threatened by Ronnie's wealth or power. He was wounded by the years of calculated omission, by the realization that she had watched him struggle and strive while sitting on resources that could have eased his path. She let me exhaust myself, building something to take care of her, he said bitterly, knowing the whole time she could buy my entire company with her pocket change. Beth's thumb stroked his knuckles in a gesture meant to soothe. Perhaps she enjoyed the imbalance. Some people thrive on holding power, others don't know they possess. The suggestion was insidious, planting seeds of doubt where there had been only confusion. Would Ronnie deliberately mislead him for some psychological advantage? It seemed at odds with the woman he loved, and yet he hadn't imagined her capable of maintaining such an enormous deception for years either. I don't know what to think anymore, he admitted. Then don't think, Beth suggested, her voice dropping to a seductive murmur. Not tonight. Tonight, just feel. She leaned across the table, her intention clear. For a heartbeat, he was tempted to lose himself in something familiar, something uncomplicated by years of lies. The moment was shattered by a flash of light. A photographer moving quickly past their secluded table, his camera already tucked away as he hurried toward the exit. Michael jerked back, reality crashing over him like ice water. Did he just ignore it? Beth said, her recovery almost seamless as she reached for him again. It's nothing, probably just a tourist with bad timing. But something in her eyes, a flicker of satisfaction quickly masked, triggered an avalanche of realizations. Michael replayed the evening with new clarity. Her insistence on this particular restaurant, known for celebrity sightings, the secluded table that somehow wasn't secluded enough to prevent a clear photograph, the way she'd positioned herself to face the room while keeping him with his back to the door, her perfectly timed leaning forward just as the photographer appeared. Pieces fell into place with sickening precision. The sympathetic conversation, the validating words, the calculated vulnerability, all building to this moment. Like a chess player setting up a board 6 moves in advance. You planned this, he said slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet as he pulled his hand from hers. All of it. You wanted me photographed with you tonight. For a split second, genuine alarm crossed Beth's face, the look of a performer whose carefully rehearsed scene had gone off script, then her features rearranged into righteous indignation. Don't be ridiculous, she scoffed, but the denial came a beat too late. The restaurant choice, Michael continued, his mind racing through the evening with painful clarity. The intimate table, the convenient photographer. This entire evening was orchestrated to create exactly one thing, a picture of us together, that would destroy any chance of reconciliation with Ronnie. She had the grace to look momentarily abashed before her expression hardened into something more calculating. You needed someone on your side, Michael. I was giving you that. If a photo helps push you toward the right decision, where's the harm? The right decision, he repeated, disgust rising like bile in his throat. You mean the decision you want, the one that benefits you? No, she insisted, reaching for him again. The one that's best for you. For us. There is no us, he said, standing abruptly with such force that water glasses rattled on the table. There never was. Not really. You weren't creating support, Beth. You were creating a narrative, making sure the humiliated husband was seen seeking comfort with his ex, positioned perfectly to twist the knife in Ronnie's heart. You're overthinking. This, she protested, but her eyes betrayed her. This is what you've always done, isn't it? He realized aloud. Manipulated situations to your advantage. Created dramas where there were none. I came back because I still love you, she insisted, rising to face him. Everything else is secondary to that. He studied her face, the perfect features, the practiced expression of wounded innocence. How had he ever mistaken this for love? You don't love me, Beth, he said quietly. You never did. You love the challenge, the game, and I'm not playing anymore. He threw enough cash on the table to cover their drinks and walked out, ignoring her calls for him to come back. Outside, the night air cleared his head. What a fool he'd been. Not just tonight, but for weeks. He'd allowed Beth's reappearance to sabotage the one real thing in his life. He'd turned Ronnie's omission into betrayal, while conveniently ignoring his own transgressions. He pulled out his phone, intending to call Ronnie to beg for a chance to talk. But as he scrolled to her name, a news alert flashed across his screen. Tech. Pioneer Michael Dawson seeks comfort with ex while billionaire wife travels solo. Beneath it was the photo, him and Beth at dinner, her hand on his, their faces intimately close. The damage was done, and with remarkable speed. His phone rang in his hand. Ronnie's name on the screen. His heart leaped, then plummeted. She'd seen it already. Of course she had. "Ronnie," he answered, desperation in his voice. "It's not what it looks like." "It rarely is," she replied, her tone measured but with an undercurrent of pain that twisted his heart. "I just wanted to let you know I'm extending my stay at the lake house indefinitely. My assistant will coordinate with yours about collecting the rest of my things from the penthouse." "Please," he begged, "let me explain. Beth set this up. The photographer, everything." "I'm sure she did," Ronnie said softly, "just as I'm sure you walked willingly into whatever trap she laid. We've both made our choices, Michael." "No," he protested. "This isn't a choice, it's a mistake. A stupid momentary lapse in judgment. What we have is real, Ronnie. 5 years of love and trust and—" "Trust?" she interrupted, the word sharp as broken glass. "Is that what you call disappearing on our anniversary to be with her? Or spending tonight with her while I'm trying to give you space to process my revelation?" Each question landed like a physical blow. "I deserve that," he acknowledged. "But please, don't make decisions based on one photograph. We both know images can be deceiving. After all, you presented a very different picture of yourself for years." Her silence told him the comparison had struck home. "We've both made mistakes," he continued, softer now. "We've both kept secrets, but none of that changes how I feel about you. I love you, Ronnie. The real you, whoever that is." "The problem is," she finally replied, "I'm not sure you know who that is yet. And right now, I'm not certain you deserve to find out." The call ended, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk, the words he should have said weeks ago dying unspoken on his lips. Ronnie set her phone down gently, though what she really wanted was to hurl it against the wall. The photograph had been a knife to the heart. Michael and Beth, heads bent close, his hand in hers. Despite his protestations, the intimacy between them was unmistakable. She moved to the lake house porch, seeking solace in the peaceful water view. Stars reflected on the still surface, a mirror universe where perhaps some version of them had made different choices. Her assistant had carefully managed the fallout from her public reveal as R.E. Burnett. The business world had been stunned, then fascinated. Her company's stock had initially faltered, then surged as investors responded to the dramatic narrative of the secret billionaire. What the press couldn't capture was the personal cost. The relief of finally being fully herself in the world was overshadowed by the threatened loss of the one person who had made her feel complete. The sound of tires on gravel made her tense. Michael again? She wasn't ready for another confrontation, but the car that pulled up was unfamiliar, as was the elegant blonde woman who emerged from it, Beth Carter. In the flesh. Ronnie squared her shoulders and moved to the edge of the porch. "You're trespassing," she called out. Beth approached anyway, her designer heels unsuitable for the rustic setting, but her confidence undimmed. "I think it's time we talked, woman to woman. I have nothing to say to you, but I have plenty to say to you," Beth countered, climbing the porch steps uninvited. "Starting with the fact that Michael deserves better than either of us." The unexpected statement caught Ronnie off guard. "What? Beth leaned against the porch railing, studying Ronnie with sharp eyes. You built an entire relationship on a lie. I shattered one with my selfishness. Neither of us has treated him with the honesty he deserves. Don't equate my situation with yours, Ronnie said coldly. I kept one aspect of my life private. You abandoned him when he needed support, then returned to destroy our marriage when he was finally happy. Beth's laugh lacked humor. Is that what you tell yourself? That I'm the villain and you're the wounded heroine? We're more alike than you want to admit, Ronnie Burnett. We both wanted him on our terms. The observation was uncomfortable in its accuracy. Hadn't she crafted her relationship with Michael precisely as she wanted it? Controlled the narrative by withholding crucial truths? Why are you here? Ronnie demanded, unwilling to acknowledge the parallel. To make you an offer, Beth replied. Walk away. Give Michael a clean break. Let him. Find someone who can be completely honest from the beginning. Someone like you? Ronnie asked incredulously. Beth's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, or perhaps someone neither of us has met. The point is, we've both damaged him in different ways. Maybe the kindest thing is to let him go. The suggestion landed, like a physical blow. Walk away from Michael, from the only man she'd ever truly loved. But what if Beth was right? What if the kindest act of love would be releasing him from the complexities they'd created? I'll consider your perspective, Ronnie said carefully, unwilling to reveal how deeply the words had affected her. Now please leave. Beth studied her a moment longer, then nodded. One last thing. That photo tonight. I did arrange it. But Michael walked out the moment he realized it. He's still stupidly, incomprehensibly in love with you. With that parting revelation, she turned and left, leaving Ronnie to wonder why her supposed rival would offer such a gift of truth. Alone again, Ronnie sank into a porch chair, Beth's words echoing in her mind. Was walking away the answer? Or was it time to fight for the man she loved with a transparency she'd never before attempted? As the moon rose over the lake, casting silver light across the water, Ronnie Burnett faced the most important decision of her life, one that no amount of wealth or business acumen could help her make. Chapter 6. Rising Phoenix. Michael stood in the empty bedroom of their penthouse, surrounded by vacant closet space where Ronnie's clothes had once hung. Her assistant had come while he was at the office, efficiently removing all traces of her presence. Only her scent remained, a faint hint of jasmine that haunted the rooms like a ghost. 2 weeks had passed since the disastrous dinner with Beth. 2 weeks of unanswered calls and returned messages. The tabloids had feasted on their separation, constructing elaborate narratives about the secret billionaire and her humiliated husband. The latest headline had been particularly cutting. Dawson. Drowning. CEO's company struggles as wife's empire soars. It wasn't just tabloid fantasy. Dawson Tech was indeed struggling. Key investors had pulled out after the Beth fiasco, concerned about his judgment and stability. The merger he'd been counting on had fallen through. For the first time, bankruptcy loomed as a real possibility. His phone rang. His assistant, not. Ronnie, Mr. Dawson, the board is assembled for the emergency meeting. I'll be there in 20, he replied, taking one last look around the bedroom that now felt like a mausoleum to his failed marriage. The numbers speak for themselves, said Anderson, his CFO, gesturing to the projection on the wall. Without immediate capital injection, we'll be insolvent within 60 days. The board members exchanged grim looks. They'd trusted Michael's leadership for years, but the company's tailspin had been swift and devastating. What about additional investors? Michael asked. No one's returning our calls, Anderson admitted. The current publicity situation has made conventional funding impossible. Michael understood the euphemism. His personal life had become a liability to the company he'd built from nothing. There is one option, said Matthews, the oldest board member. Re Enterprises has expressed interest in a strategic partnership. The room fell silent. Re Enterprises, Ronnie's company. When? Michael asked, his voice strained. Their representative contacted us yesterday, Matthews replied. They're prepared to offer significant capital in exchange for a minority stake. Michael's hands clenched under the table. Was this Ronnie's way of reaching out? Or was it a business move, cold and calculated, to acquire his struggling company at a discount? I need to think about this, he said, rising. Meeting adjourned until tomorrow. The drive to the lake house felt simultaneously interminable and too brief. Each mile gave Michael time to organize his thoughts. Yet when he finally turned onto the familiar gravel drive, he felt utterly unprepared. Ronnie sat on the porch swing, a vision in simple jeans and an oversized sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She showed no surprise at his appearance. You knew I'd come, he said, climbing the steps. I hoped, she replied, her voice soft but composed. The offer came from my CFO, not me. I didn't know about it until this morning. Of course she hadn't. Ronnie wouldn't use business as leverage in their personal relationship. He should have known that. I'm not here about the offer, he said, remaining standing. I'm here about us. Is there still an us, Michael? The question hung between them, weighted with weeks of separation and years of half-truths. I want there to be, he said simply. I've been an idiot, Ronnie. About Beth, about everything. She studied him, her dark eyes revealing nothing. What changed? Nothing. Everything. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I realized I'd been so fixated on your deception that I couldn't see my own. I've been angry that you hid your wealth from me while I was hiding my meetings with Beth from you. It's not quite the same thing, she said. No, he acknowledged. What you did was protect yourself from potential rejection. What I did was betray your trust out of vanity and weakness. He finally sat beside her on the swing, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I miss you, he said quietly. Not the penthouse or our life together, though I miss those too. I miss you, your laugh, your terrible singing in the shower, the way you always know what I'm thinking before I say it. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I'm not sure I ever really knew what you were thinking. You knew the important parts, he insisted. The real parts. My dreams, my fears, my heart. The core of who I am. And you, she asked. Did you know the real me? He considered the question carefully. I knew the woman who cries at dog food commercials and hates cilantro. Who reads the end of mystery novels first because she can't stand the suspense? Who has more compassion and integrity than anyone I've ever met? He paused. That's the real you. The billion-dollar empire is just context. A single tear slid down her cheek, which she quickly brushed away. I should have told you from the beginning. Yes, he agreed, and I should never have let Beth back into our lives. We've both made mistakes, Ronnie. The question is, can we find a way forward? She looked out at the lake where the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and crimson. I don't know, Michael. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Then, let me rebuild it, he said, finally reaching for her hand. Day by day, moment by moment, whatever it takes. She didn't pull away, but neither did she return his grip. What about your company? I know things are difficult. The company doesn't matter. Nothing matters except making this right between us. Her surprise was evident. Your company is your dream, your legacy. You're my dream, he said simply. Everything else is just details. For the first time, a real smile warmed her features. That might be the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm trying something new, he said, returning her smile. Complete honesty. It's terrifying. A comfortable silence settled between them as the swing rocked gently. Progress, small but significant. What about the partnership offer? She finally asked. "That's your decision," he said. "As a businesswoman, I won't use our personal relationship to influence a corporate matter." Her eyebrow raised. "Even if it means losing your company?" "Even then," he confirmed. "I built it from nothing once. I can do it again if necessary." She studied him with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time the man he could be, not the ambitious husband or the struggling CEO, but Michael Dawson, stripped of pretense and pride. "Stay for dinner," she said finally. "Not as CEO to CEO, not even as husband to wife, just as us, trying to find our way back." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a chance he hadn't dared hope for. "I'd like that," he said, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. As twilight settled over the lake, they moved inside together, two people with a mountain of issues to resolve, but taking the first steps on the journey back to each other. The phoenix of their love wasn't yet reborn from the ashes of deception and hurt, but the fire had been kindled, and for tonight, that was enough. Chapter 7. Unexpected encounter. 3 weeks had passed since that dinner at the lake house. 3 weeks of cautious rebuilding. Michael and Ronnie had established a delicate routine, dinners twice a week, honest conversations that often stretched until dawn, and a careful distance that respected the fragility of their healing relationship. Tonight was different. After weeks of Michael coming to her, Ronnie had agreed to meet him in the city for a charity gala, their first public appearance since the media explosion around her identity. Ronnie examined her reflection in the hotel suite mirror, smoothing the midnight blue gown that hugged her curves before falling in a graceful sweep to the floor. Her stylist had suggested something more dramatic, befitting the newly revealed billionaire CEO, but Ronnie had insisted on this dress. It was the same one she'd worn on their first anniversary, when Michael had looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. Her phone chimed with a message from him. "Waiting in the lobby. Take your time. You're worth waiting for." The simple sentiment brought a smile to her lips. This new Michael, humble, patient, completely transparent, was both familiar and strange. She'd glimpsed this version of him during their early days together, before success and secrets had created barriers between them. She took one last look in the mirror, squared her shoulders, and headed downstairs. The moment Michael saw her, descending the grand staircase, everything else in the opulent lobby faded to background noise. Her dress, that blue dress he remembered so vividly, the elegant sweep of her hair, the nervous smile that played at her lips. She was breathtaking. "You remembered," he said when she reached him, his voice thick with emotion. "So did you," she replied, noting the cufflinks she'd given him that same anniversary. He offered his arm, and the familiar gesture felt both ordinary and monumental. Another small brick in the foundation they were rebuilding. "Ready for this?" he asked as they approached the waiting car. "The press will be relentless." She took a steadying breath. "I'm used to scrutiny now. The question is, are you ready? They'll be watching your every move, analyzing what it means for the power couple in crisis." His laugh was genuine. "Let them analyze. All they'll see is a man hopelessly trying to win back his wife's heart." The raw honesty in his statement caught her off guard. This was the difference in Michael now, the complete absence of pride or pretense. "You're making it difficult to maintain appropriate boundaries," she murmured as he helped her into the car. "Good," he replied simply. The ballroom of the Harrington Hotel had been transformed into a glittering wonderland for the Children's Hospital benefit. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over New York's elite, gathered to support the cause, and more importantly, to be seen supporting it. As Michael and Ronnie entered, a ripple of awareness moved through the crowd. Conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers began. The secret billionaire and her CEO husband, together despite the rumors of imminent divorce. Sharks smelling blood. Michael commented under his breath, feeling the predatory gazes of the socialites and reporters. "Just smile and remember why we're here," Ronnie replied, squeezing his arm gently. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, making small talk and accepting both sincere and insincere expressions of support for their difficult time. Ronnie handled the attention with a grace that Michael found himself admiring anew. She'd always had this poise, he realized, the natural authority of someone comfortable with power. How had he missed it for so long? Michael Dawson, a familiar voice, interrupted his thoughts, and the illustrious R.E. Burnett herself. How deliciously awkward. Beth stood before them, resplendent in a scarlet gown that seemed designed to draw every eye in the room. Her smile was sharp as a newly honed blade. "Beth," he acknowledged coolly, "I didn't realize you'd be here tonight." "Last-minute invitation," she said, her gaze fixed on Ronnie. "I do love a good cause, almost as much as I love a good drama." Ronnie met Beth's stare with remarkable composure. "Ms. Carter, I believe we've only formally met once at the lake house, under rather unusual circumstances." Beth's laugh was brittle. "Unusual indeed, though not as unusual as a wife hiding a billion-dollar empire from her husband for years. That must have been quite the revelation, Michael. Not as revealing as discovering the true nature of someone I once thought I knew," he replied evenly, his gaze steady on Beth. Her eyes narrowed at the pointed remark. "Well, aren't you diplomatic tonight? Such a change from our last conversation." Ronnie's posture stiffened imperceptibly, the only sign that the barb had landed. "If you'll excuse us," Michael said, placing a protective hand at the small of Ronnie's back, "we should greet our hosts." "Of course," Beth smiled, stepping closer to whisper in his ear, "but we both know this reconciliation is just for show. Call me when the cameras are gone, and you're ready for something real again." He pulled back, disgust evident in his expression. "Goodbye, Beth." As they moved away, Ronnie maintained her composure until they reached a quiet corner near the terrace. "Dawes, what did she say to you?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Nothing worth repeating," Michael assured her, "and nothing I haven't heard before." Ronnie studied his face. "She's not giving up, is she?" "It doesn't matter. I already have." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. "Beth is my past, a past I should have left buried. You're my present, Ronnie. And if I'm incredibly fortunate, my future too." The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. For a moment, the crowded ballroom faded away, and they were just Michael and Ronnie again. Two people who had found in each other something rare and precious. "Dance with me," he said suddenly. She hesitated. "Michael, everyone's watching." "Let them," he replied, leading her toward the dance floor where other couples swayed to the orchestra's waltz. "Let them see that despite everything, the lies, the mistakes, the misunderstandings, we're still here, still fighting for us." He took her in his arms, his hand settling respectfully at her waist as they began to move with the music. The familiar contours of her body against his, the scent of her perfume, the way she still followed his lead without hesitation, it was like coming home after a long exile. "I've missed this," he admitted softly. "I've missed us." Her eyes, when they met his, contained a vulnerability he rarely saw. "So have I. But Michael, can we ever get back to what we were?" "No," he said honestly, "we can't go backward. But maybe we can build something new, something better, because it's built on complete truth this time." The honesty in his answer seemed to reassure her. She relaxed in his arms, allowing herself to move closer as they danced. "Why did you keep your identity secret for so long?" he asked, the question that had plagued him for weeks finally finding voice. "Not just from me, but from the world." She considered her answer carefully. "At first, it was practical. I was young, Female and building a company in male-dominated industries. Anonymity gave me freedom to operate without prejudice. And later, it became a way to separate who I was from what I owned, she admitted. To know that people who cared about me, friends, colleagues, you, valued me for myself, not my bank account. Did you really believe I would have treated you differently if I'd known? Her eyes met his, unflinching. Wouldn't you have? Be honest, Michael. If we'd met and you'd known immediately who I was, would our relationship have developed the same way? The question gave him pause. Would he have pursued Ronnie with the same openness if he'd known she was R.E. Burnett? Or would he have been intimidated, cautious, perhaps even calculating? I don't know, he admitted finally. I'd like to think I would have loved you just the same, but I was in a different place then. Wounded from Beth, desperate to prove myself. She nodded, accepting his honesty without judgment. That's why I waited. But the longer I waited, the harder it became to find the right moment. And then it was too late, he finished. The secret had grown too big. Until it wasn't a secret anymore, she said softly. The music changed to a slower tempo, and without discussion they remained on the dance floor, their bodies drawing closer naturally. I understand now, he said, his lips near her ear. I don't agree with your choice, but I understand it. She pulled back slightly to look at him, and I understand why Beth's return was so disruptive. She represented unfinished business, a chance to rewrite an ending that had hurt you deeply. The mutual acknowledgement felt like a turning point, a new level of understanding that transcended the hurt they'd caused each other. Across the room, Beth watched them with narrowed eyes, her expression darkening as she saw the unmistakable intimacy in their dance. She raised her champagne glass in a mock toast when Michael's gaze briefly met hers, her smile not reaching her eyes. She's not finished with us, Ronnie observed, following his glance. No, he agreed, but we're finished with her. The certainty in his voice was like a balm to Ronnie's lingering doubts. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to fully relax in his arms, to reclaim the connection that had defined the best years of her life. Take me home, Michael, she whispered when the dance ended. His eyes searched hers, hope and caution, warring in his expression. Home, as in the lake house, she clarified with a small smile. One step at a time, he nodded, understanding the boundaries she still needed. One step at a time, he agreed, offering his arm to escort her from the ballroom. They made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well-wishes from those who saw in their united front a romantic reconciliation worth celebrating. Beth stood near the exit, her posture rigid as they approached. Leaving so soon? She asked, ice in her tone, despite the smile fixed on her face. Good night, Beth, Michael said firmly, not slowing his stride. This isn't over, Beth called after them, loud enough for nearby guests to turn curiously. Ronnie paused, then turned, back with composed dignity. Yes, Miss Carter, it is. It has been for years. The only person who hasn't accepted that is you. With that parting remark, she turned and walked out with Michael, leaving Beth standing alone amid whispers and speculative glances. Outside, the night air was cool against their heated skin as they waited for their car. Michael looked down at Ronnie, marveling at the strength and grace she'd shown throughout the evening. You're remarkable, you know that? He said, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. So I've been told, she replied with a hint of the playful banter that had once been so natural between them, usually by my shareholders. He laughed, the sound genuine and unrestrained. And they don't even know the half of it. As their car arrived and Michael helped her inside, Ronnie felt something shift between them. A corner turned, a new path opening before them. The journey ahead would still require work, still demand courage and honesty from them both. But for the first time since Beth had reappeared in their lives, Ronnie believed they might find their way back to each other, not to what they had been, That was gone forever, but to something new, something stronger, forged in the fire of truth and tempered by forgiveness. As the car pulled away from the glittering hotel, Ronnie reached for Michael's hand in the darkness, one step at a time. Chapter 8. Truth and Consequences. Firelight danced across Ronnie's face as she curled against Michael on the lake house sofa. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. 6 weeks of careful rebuilding had yielded moments like this, quiet, honest healing. "I've been meaning to tell you something," Michael said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "The board meeting yesterday wasn't just quarterly projections." Ronnie shifted to look up at him. "Oh? Dawson Tech is filing for Chapter 11. The words should have been devastating, but his voice held surprising calm. "The company I built from nothing is officially failing." She studied his face, searching for the anguish she expected. "You seem at peace with this." "That's what surprises me most," he admitted. 6 months ago, this would have destroyed me. My entire identity was wrapped up in being a successful CEO. His eyes met hers, clear and certain. "Now, I realize it's just something I did, not who I am." "And who are you?" she asked softly. His smile was gentle as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm the man who loves you, who finally understands what matters. The rest is just details." The firelight, who caught the tear that slid down her cheek before she could hide it. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "So proud of the man you've become." Later that night, after they'd made love with a tender intensity that left them both breathless, Michael reached into his discarded jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This isn't what you think," he said, seeing her startled expression. "Or maybe it is in a way." Inside was not a ring, but a key, simple, unadorned. "The penthouse," he explained. "I've moved out, found a small place downtown that's just mine, paid for with what's left of my savings, not company money." "Michael, let me finish," he said gently. "That key represents something important. When you're ready, if you're ready, I want you to invite me back into your life. Not as the man who once thought he owned the space or you, but as someone who's earned the right to share it." Her eyes filled with fresh tears as she closed her fingers around the key. "Ask me," she whispered. "Ask you what, if I'm ready?" His heart lodged in his throat as he held her gaze. "Ronnie Burnett Dawson, are you ready to build something new together? Something honest this time?" "Yes," she said simply, the word carrying the weight of their entire journey. "I'm ready." The blaring of Ronnie's phone shattered their peaceful morning. Her security chief's voice was taut with urgency. "Ms. Burnett, there's been an incident at the New York office. Beth Carter attempted to access restricted areas with falsified credentials. She had documents claiming to transfer Dawson Tech's intellectual property to her holding company." Michael's face darkened as he took the phone. "Beth," he said flatly, "what game are you playing now?" Her laughter through the speaker had an unhinged quality. "Game? This was my insurance policy, Michael. You were supposed to choose me. That was never going to happen." "Then you leave me no choice," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "Officers are here to arrest me, but before they do, everyone should know I'm carrying your child." The line went dead as Michael stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. "She's lying," he finally said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "We never, not once since our marriage." Ronnie's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. "I believe you." Before they could process the threat, both their phones lit up with notifications. Beth had orchestrated her performance perfectly, collapsing dramatically as officers approached, tearfully announcing her condition within earshot of a business reporter who'd been covering the fraud attempt. The story had already exploded. Online, secret billionaire's husband expecting child with ex, and tangled love triangle, Dawson Tech, CEO's double life. She's calculated this perfectly, Ronnie said as they rushed back to the city. A pregnancy claim creates immediate sympathy for her and suspicion toward you. By the time tests disprove it, the narrative will be set. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. I won't let her destroy what we've rebuilt. The hotel ballroom bristled with cameras when they arrived for the hastily arranged press conference. Social media reactions scrolled on screens behind the podium, their private pain transformed into public entertainment. Michael stepped forward first, his face composed despite the fury burning in his chest. I'll address the allegations directly. Any claim that I fathered a child with Beth Carter is categorically false. I have already submitted to DNA testing this morning. He paused, then deliberately set aside his prepared statement. The room sensed the shift and the murmuring quieted. But scientific proof isn't why we're here today. We're here because something more important is at stake. The truth about who we are and what we've learned. His voice softened as he turned slightly toward Ronnie. 5 years ago, I married an extraordinary woman who kept her success hidden, fearing I would love her wealth instead of her heart. When I discovered she was R.E. Burnett, I felt betrayed. Never. Seeing how my reaction validated her deepest fears. Ronnie's eyes never left his face, giving him strength to continue. When my ex-wife reappeared, I made choices I deeply regret. I risked everything precious for what was ultimately an illusion of solving unfinished business. He faced the reporters. Again, his expression utterly open. I stand before you not as a successful CEO. That chapter is ending. Not as a perfect husband, my mistakes have been painfully public, but as a man who finally understands what truly matters. Ronnie stepped forward then, her quiet dignity commanding the room's attention. For years, I hid behind a fabricated persona, believing I was protecting myself from those who would value only my fortune. That deception created a marriage built on unstable ground. Her hand found Michael's, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. What we've learned through this painful journey is that true strength isn't found in wealth or carefully constructed facades. It comes from the courage to be vulnerable, to admit when you're wrong, and to fight for what matters most. A reporter called out, "Are you staying together despite everything?" Michael and Ronnie exchanged a look of such intimate understanding that many in the room shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware they were intruding on something deeply personal. "We're not staying together," Michael corrected gently. "We're choosing each other, again with open eyes and honest hearts." The questions that followed were answered with unprecedented candor. No corporate speak, no careful evasions, just two people reclaiming their narrative with quiet determination. As they left the podium, media clamoring behind them, Michael leaned close to Ronnie's ear. "Let's go home." "The lake house?" she asked. He shook his head, squeezing her hand. "The penthouse, our home." They walked out into the fading afternoon light, knowing the storm wasn't over. Beth's legal troubles, Dawson Tech's uncertain future, the public's fascination with their story, but certain they would weather it together. The foundation they stood on now wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on hard-won truth rather than comfortable illusions, and that made all the difference. Chapter 9. Heart's Redemption. Morning sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, painting golden stripes across the rumpled sheets. Ronnie watched Michael as he slept, his face relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in months. The lines of worry that had etched themselves around his eyes had softened, and he looked younger, unburdened. 2 months had passed since the press conference that had changed everything. Beth's pregnancy claims had been proven false, as they'd known they would be. The media storm had eventually subsided, giving way to a new narrative about redemption and second chances that was much closer to their truth. Dawson Tech's bankruptcy proceedings continued, but with unexpected developments. Once Michael had embraced transparency about both his company's struggles and his personal life, several smaller investors had come forward, interested in salvaging the core technology. Not enough to save the company in its current form, but perhaps enough to build something new from its ashes. Ronnie had deliberately kept RE Enterprises separate from these negotiations, understanding that Michael needed to find his own path forward. It was one of many difficult lessons they'd both learned, the importance of maintaining their individual identities, even as they rebuilt their life together. Michael stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. His slow smile, still drowsy with sleep, made her heart skip. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured, reaching to trace her cheek with gentle fingers. "How long have you been awake?" "Not long," she replied, leaning into his touch. "Just thinking." "Dangerous occupation before coffee," he teased, pulling her closer until she was nestled against his chest. "What about us? How far we've come?" His arms tightened around her. "And how far we still have to go," she nodded against his shoulder. Despite their reconciliation, there were still moments of uncertainty between them, brief hesitations, careful considerations of words. The easy, unconscious intimacy they'd once shared was returning slowly, like a garden recovering after a harsh winter. "I bought something yesterday," she said, changing the subject. "A surprise!" His eyebrow raised in curiosity. "Should I be worried?" She laughed, slipping from his embrace and padding across the room to retrieve an envelope from her desk. "It's not diamonds or sports cars, so you can relax." "Good," he said, sitting up against the headboard. "I'm more of a simple pleasures man these days." The transformation in him still amazed her, from the status-conscious CEO to this more grounded, authentic version of Michael who found joy in small moments and meaningful connections. She handed him the envelope, suddenly nervous. "It's something I hope we both want." He opened it carefully, pulling out the deed to a property. His eyes widened as he read the address. "The cottage on Willow Lane." She nodded, watching his reaction closely. "Do you remember the first time?" "We saw it, of course," he said softly. "Our first anniversary. We were driving back from the beach and got lost. You saw it and said it was your dream home." The small stone cottage had been for sale then. A charming historical property with a wildflower garden and a brook running along its boundary. They'd stopped to peek through the windows, imagining a life there together, away from the city's constant demands. "We talked about buying it," she continued, "but then your company expanded and my work demanded more attention, and we convinced ourselves the penthouse made more sense. Practical," he agreed, "but not what our hearts wanted." She sat beside him on the bed, carefully gauging his reaction. "The cottage came back on the market last week. I bought it yesterday." He looked up from the deed, his expression unreadable. "For us?" "If you want," she said, suddenly uncertain. "I thought maybe we could start fresh, build the life we talked about before success and secrets complicated everything." For a long moment he was silent, and Ronnie felt a flutter of panic. Had she overstepped, made assumptions about what he wanted now? Then he smiled. A radiant, unguarded smile that erased her doubts instantly. "You remembered," he said, echoing her words from the charity gala. "Every detail," she confirmed. "The wraparound porch where we'd drink coffee and watch the sunrise, the garden where we'd grow our own vegetables, the second bedroom that would be perfect for—" She stopped abruptly, the words catching in her throat. They hadn't discussed children since their reconciliation, though it had been part of their original plan, before everything fell apart. Michael caught her hesitation, his eyes softening with understanding. He set the deed aside and took both, her hands in his. "For a nursery, he finished for her, for the family we talked about having someday. The hope in his voice brought tears to her eyes. Is that still what you want, after everything? It's what I've always wanted, he said simply. A life with you, children, purpose beyond balance sheets and corporate acquisitions. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. I didn't know if we were ready to talk about that yet. His hands moved to cup her face gently. Ronnie, we've wasted too much time not talking about the things that really matter. I don't want to waste any more. She nodded, overcome by the simple truth of his words. They had spent years existing in parallel universes, she in her secret corporate world, he in his public business persona, never fully inhabiting the same reality until now. When can we see it? He asked, picking up the deed again. The cottage? Today, if you want. I have the keys. The boyish excitement that lit his face reminded her of the Michael she'd first fallen in love with, the dreamer beneath the ambitious exterior. Let's go right now, he suggested, already sliding out of bed, before something interrupts or distracts us. She laughed at his enthusiasm, but understood the impulse. Their reconciliation had been constantly tested by external forces, Beth's machinations, the bankruptcy proceedings, the persistent attention of the press. This cottage represented something untouched by that chaos, a future defined solely by their choices, not their circumstances. They drove out of the city with the windows down, the summer air warm against their skin. Michael insisted on taking his car, the modest sedan he'd purchased after downsizing his life, rather than Ronnie's luxury vehicles. I want us to arrive as equals, he'd explained, and she understood the symbolism without needing further explanation. The countryside unfolded before them, rolling hills giving way to quaint villages, and eventually the small town where their cottage waited. As they turned onto Willow Lane, Ronnie felt Michael's hand reach for hers, his fingers intertwining with hers, in a gesture that spoke of shared dreams. There it is, she breathed, as the stone cottage came into view. It was exactly as they remembered, 2 stories of weathered grey stone with climbing roses framing the arched doorway, a wrap-around porch with a swing, and gardens that had grown wild in the current owner's absence. The brook still bubbled along the property line, catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. They sat in the car for a moment, taking it in. It needs work, Michael observed, noting the sagging gutters and overgrown path. Yes, she agreed, but that's part of why I love it. It's not perfect or polished. It needs care and attention. It needs love, he finished, squeezing her hand. Just like us. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. Their relationship, like this neglected cottage, had strong foundations, but required renewal, patient restoration rather than instant perfection. As they walked through the rooms, the cozy living area with its stone fireplace, the kitchen with its vintage charm, the upstairs bedrooms with views of the surrounding countryside, they found themselves naturally planning, dreaming aloud as they had in the early days of their marriage. The dining room needs a big farmhouse table, Michael said, envisioning family gatherings, something solid that will last generations. And this room, Ronnie said, standing in the smaller upstairs bedroom, could be your office until... She didn't complete the thought, but Michael's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder as they both imagined cribs and rocking chairs, tiny clothes and midnight feedings. Until we need it for someone smaller, he murmured against her ear. They ended their tour on the back porch, sitting side by side on the steps as the afternoon sun began its descent, painting the garden in warm gold. Why did we wait so long? Ronnie asked quietly. To pursue what we really wanted? Michael considered the question carefully. I think we got caught up in who we thought we should be, rather than who we wanted to be. I was so focused on proving myself to the world, to Beth's ghost, maybe even to you, that I lost sight of what would actually make me happy. She nodded, understanding completely, and I was so afraid of being valued only for my wealth and position that I created walls where they didn't need to exist. I didn't give you the chance to show me you could love all of me, the businesswoman and the woman who just wants a simple life in a stone cottage. But we're here now, he said, his hand finding hers again. Better late than never, right? The simple optimism in his voice brought tears to her eyes. He was right. They had taken a difficult path, but it had led them here, to this moment of clarity and shared purpose that might never have been possible without the trials they'd endured. I want to bring something back, she said suddenly. From our old life, his eyebrow raised in question. Our wedding rings, she explained. I still have them, both of them, in my jewelry box. I never could bring myself to put them away completely. The confession seemed to touch him deeply. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her bare ring finger. I'd like that, a symbol of continuity, even as we start anew. They stayed until sunset, making plans and sharing memories, reconnecting with the younger versions of themselves who had once stopped at this cottage and dreamed of a simpler life. When they finally drove back toward the city, Ronnie felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years, as if the last pieces of a complex puzzle had finally fallen into place. Back at the penthouse, as moonlight spilled across their bed, Michael held her close, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. "Move in with me," she whispered, the words escaping before she'd fully formed the thought. He pulled back slightly to look at her. "I thought I already had." "No, I mean to the cottage," she clarified. "Not next month or when renovations are done. Tomorrow. Let's pack what matters and leave the rest behind." Rather than responding with words, he answered with a kiss. Tender at first, then deepening with an intensity that spoke of renewal and hope and promises kept. As they came together beneath the moonlight, every touch was a vow renewed. Every whispered endearment a brick in the foundation of their rebuilt love. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets and each other, Ronnie traced the outline of his face with gentle fingers, memorizing him all over again. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "That I never stopped loving you," she admitted. "Even during our worst moments, even when I thought we might not find our way back." "I know," he said softly. "I felt it too, like a thread connecting us, even when everything else had unraveled." She nestled closer, content in a way she hadn't been for longer than she cared to remember. Tomorrow would bring packing boxes and practical decisions, the beginning of their new life together. But tonight was for this, rediscovering the profound intimacy that had been the true foundation of their relationship from the beginning. As sleep began to claim her, Ronnie made a silent promise to herself and to the man holding her so tenderly to never again allow pride or fear to come between them. Their love had survived betrayal, deception, and the manipulations of those who would tear them apart. It had emerged stronger, deeper, and more resilient than before. Like the phoenix rising from ashes, they had been reborn through fire, transformed rather than destroyed by the flames of their ordeal. Chapter 10. Love's Fortune. 1 year later, the cottage on Willow Lane had blossomed under their care, much like the love that had found renewal within its weathered stone walls. Climbing roses now framed the arched doorway in a riot of pinks and reds. The once overgrown gardens had been tamed into a harmonious blend of vegetables and wildflowers, and the wraparound porch had become their favorite place to watch both sunrises and sunsets. Inside, the rooms reflected the new life Michael and Ronnie had built together, not the sleek minimalism of their former penthouse, nor the sterile perfection of a designer showcase, but a warm, lived-in home filled with books, comfortable furniture, and mementos of their journey. On this particular summer evening, Ronnie sat on the porch swing, her hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her stomach, their first child due in winter. She watched as Michael moved through the garden, harvesting tomatoes for their dinner. The simple domestic scene still filled her with wonder, how far they had come from the carefully compartmentalized lives they'd once led. "I think we have enough to make sauce for the entire town," she called out as his basket overflowed. He looked up, his smile illuminating his face in a way that still made her heart skip. "Can't help it," he called back. "Everything grows better here. Must be all the love in the soil." The comment was so earnestly Michael, the man who had emerged from the crucible of their trials, no longer concerned with status or power, but with the authentic joy of working with his hands and nurturing life from the earth. As he made his way back to the porch, Ronnie reflected on the transformation of their lives. Michael had salvaged the core technology from Dawson Tech's remains and launched a smaller, more focused company that developed affordable medical devices for underserved communities. The venture wasn't making him a fortune, but the pride in his. When he spoke of lives improved by their products was worth more than any stock valuation. Ronnie still ran RE Enterprises, but with a dramatically different approach, working remotely from their cottage office 3 days a week, delegating more to her capable executive team, and shifting the company's focus towards sustainable investments and social impact. They had found at last the balance that had eluded them for so long, careers that fulfilled their ambitions without consuming their lives, and a relationship built on complete transparency and mutual support. "Penny for your thoughts," Michael said, setting down his harvest to join her on the swing. His arm slipped naturally around her shoulders, pulling her close against his side. "Just thinking about everything that brought us here," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "The good and the bad. Mostly the bad," he acknowledged with a wry smile. "We took the scenic route, didn't we?" She laughed, the sound mingling with the evening bird song. "The very, very scenic route." His hand moved to cover hers on her rounded belly, where their child had just delivered a particularly enthusiastic kick. "Worth every detour, though." The simple statement carried the weight of their shared history, the lies that had nearly destroyed them, the temptations they had overcome, the hard-won honesty that now defined their relationship. "Have you heard from Marcus?" she asked, referencing Michael's former board member who now served as his partner in the new venture. He called earlier. "The FDA approved our portable dialysis unit." The modest triumph was exactly the kind of success they now celebrated, not because of stock jumps or media attention, but because it meant real help for real people. "That's wonderful," she said, genuinely proud of his work. "We should celebrate." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Already planned. There's champagne for you, the non-alcoholic kind." And Beth called. Ronnie stiffened slightly at the name, though the visceral reaction had faded with time. "Beth? What did she want?" After her arrest for attempted fraud, Beth had eventually accepted a plea deal that included community service and probation. She had retreated from their lives, seemingly accepting at last that Michael had made his choice. "To apologize, actually," Michael said, sounding as surprised as Ronnie felt. "She's moving to Europe, said she's finally ready for a fresh start and wanted to make amends before she left." "Did you believe her?" He considered the question thoughtfully. "I think so. She sounded different, less brittle, maybe even sincere." Ronnie nodded, finding within herself the capacity for compassion where once there had been only hurt and anger. "I hope she finds what she's looking for." "I already have," Michael said, his gaze so tender it brought tears to her eyes. As the sun began its descent behind the distant hills, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose, Ronnie was struck by the perfect fullness of this moment, this life they had created together. Not the life either of them had originally envisioned, perhaps, but somehow richer, deeper, more authentic than anything they could have planned. I have something for you, Michael said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. I was going to wait until our anniversary next month, but now feels right. He handed her a small velvet box that looked suspiciously like the one that had once held her wedding ring. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, was a locket, vintage silver, intricately engraved with twining vines and flowers. Open it, he urged softly. Inside were 2 photographs. On one side, their wedding day, both of them radiant with the innocent hope of new beginnings. On the other, a more recent photo taken on this very porch, their expressions weathered by experience, but illuminated by a deeper, more resilient joy. Before and after, he explained, the couple who thought love was enough, and the couple who learned love is just the beginning. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks as she closed the locket, clutching it to her heart. "It's perfect," she whispered. He took it gently from her hands and fastened it around her neck, his fingers lingering on the chain. "Like you," he murmured against her skin. "Perfect not because you're flawless, but because you're real." As twilight deepened around them, they remained on the porch, talking softly about their hopes for their child, their plans for the garden next spring, the upcoming visit from Ronnie's parents. Ordinary conversations, made extraordinary by the journey required to reach them. Later that night, as they lay together in their bedroom, the windows open to catch the summer breeze, Ronnie found herself overwhelmed by a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the happy ending they had fought so hard to achieve, but for the difficult path that had led them here. Each painful step necessary to forge the unbreakable bond they now shared. "Michael," she whispered, her voice catching with emotion, "do you ever regret it? Those lost years when we were living half-truths?" He turned to face her in the moonlight, his expression thoughtful. "I used to, but now I see those years differently. We were both hiding parts of ourselves, yes, but we were also finding our way to each other, the real versions of each other." His hand caressed the curve of her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "We had to get lost to truly find each other, and that makes what we have now all the more precious." The wisdom in his words settled over her like a blessing. They had indeed been lost. Michael in his pursuit of status and success, Ronnie in her fear of being valued only for her wealth, both hiding behind carefully constructed facades, afraid to be fully seen. "I see you now," she whispered, echoing the thought. "All of you, and I love what I see." "As I see and love you," he replied, the simple vow more meaningful than any they had exchanged at their wedding. As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms with their unborn child nestled between them, Ronnie knew they had found something rare and precious, a love tempered by trial, strengthened by forgiveness, and made unbreakable by complete acceptance of each other's truest selves. Outside their window, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the night sky, a celestial affirmation of the truth they had discovered through such painful lessons. That love's greatest fortune wasn't measured in wealth or status or perfect happiness, but in the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to cherish the hard-won joy of being truly, completely known. In the morning, they would wake to sunshine streaming through windows they had restored together, in a home they had built with equal parts sweat and dreams. They would continue the beautiful, ordinary work of tending their garden, preparing for their child, and nurturing the love that had survived its greatest test. Not the interference of Beth Carter or the revelation of Ronnie's secret empire, but their own fear of being fully known and still being worthy of love. That fear, at last, had been vanquished. In its place had grown something stronger and more enduring, a love not based on illusion or expectation, but on the profound acceptance of each other's complete truth. As Michael's breathing deepened beside her, Ronnie pressed one last kiss to his shoulder and closed her eyes, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. No longer the secret billionaire and her ambitious husband, but simply Michael and Ronnie, two imperfect people who had finally found their way home.